Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Hank from Wizard's Den, and today I'm going to do a summary and thoughts session regarding Gen Con that we had 3 weeks ago. Yes, it has been 3 weeks, and why am I doing this now? Well, I was going to release this 3 days after I put out my recap episode for Gen Con. However, I became sick right after that for like a week and was not able to get recording done, so that is why you are seeing this episode today. After all, I do have feedback for Eric's Curiosa and also other meta-analysis of the finals that I want to keep a record of. Here's the agenda. I'll briefly touch on the summary of Gen Con for the ones who might have completely missed it, then talk about each events that were held and explain how it went, explain the metagame for the championship tournament, talk about promotional items that were debuted on that day, and close with my thoughts and feedbacks to Eric's Curiosity. So, the overview. For the ones who were living under a rock, Eric's Curiosa hosted events at Gen Con from August 3rd to the 6th for Sorcery. These events were specifically aimed for playing the game, and there were no booths to sell the products. I made a recap video for this, so if you haven't checked that out, you might want to watch that first. Sorcery had these sections allocated for the event space, and they held Learn to Play, Draft, and Crown of the Victor Championship here throughout the week. Event tickets were sold out, and people were certainly interested in the first appearance of Sorcery in a huge convention. I joined the events not just to play, but also was doing volunteer work as a judge. Now let's move on to explaining how well the events went in reality and some details regarding it. The population demographic was dominated by males. I would say 98% of them were. Age demographic was mostly in the mid-30s, which is exactly what people expected as this is an old school TCG. The range was pretty wide. I would say the oldest was around 50 and the youngest was around 10 that joined the events. The level of knowledge on the game rules, or maybe I should say experience levels, were extremely wide too. There were many people who played Sorcery for the first time, while there were deck grinders like me in this same event. Most events were full. The tickets for the events were sold out, but there were some no-shows for most of the events. However, there were many people looking to join in the events with general tickets to take those spots, so the no-shows were quickly filled up and most events ended up running with full capacity. In fact, there were so many of these people eager to fill in the no-show spots that we had to randomly draw who can join. No-shows were fairly common, especially for the early morning events, which is sort of understandable. The one event that did not fill up was the Crown of the Victor Championship. This was a constructed event which had significantly higher requirements to join. The Learn to Play and Draft requires you to bring nothing, but you need to make a deck for this championship event. So that is why it is hard to fill the no-shows. 20 out of 32 seats were filled. Not bad, but I expected full seats considering the prize, so it was slightly underwhelming to be honest. The public impression for each event was very impressive without even trying to sugarcoat it. Looking over each event, I was able to see that everyone was having a great time playing Sorcery. There were a lot of judging questions, but I think everyone got the rules after clarifications. And I think there were overwhelming positive impression of the game. The interest of the game from the TCG industry was great too. I was doing a private one-to-one how to play session with a representative from a TCG related company you probably all know. The impression of the game from that figure was very positive too. The draft experience for Sorcery was surprisingly fun. It was my first time playing draft for Sorcery, and I immediately noticed how great drafting Sorcery is. Drafting alpha might be insane considering the price of a sealed box right now, but once beta comes out, it would be possible to do draft at a lower cost. I actually decided to buy some more extra beta booster boxes for draft purposes only. I think draft will be very good format to do events at a store considering the low barrier for entry and also as a great way to meaningfully consume the product. Now let me go into the metagame observation of the final tournament. Basically, I will sum it up as saying that the tournament was dominated by Death Speaker decks. Death Speaker currently has a great advantage of operating as an air fire aggro deck with a recursion twist to keep the momentum going. Typically, air fire aggros have few problems regarding running out of gas in mid-games. Unlike the Sorcerer, Death Speaker can still ramp up while reusing the minions in the cemetery to draw cards and applying pressure. The longer the game proceeds, other avatars will have issues keeping up. One nice card addition that boosted the Death Speaker decks was the card Infiltrate. This card was so useful against mid-range decks, which is a strong contender with Death Speaker. Capturing their minions and keeping it under your control is a great pseudo-removal spell, which fire lacks the most. Also, you don't lose control of the minion if you keep attacking sites, as attacking sites results in the loss of life, not damage. I would say that all the Death Speaker decks operated with similar card pools, which mainly consisted from fire and air. The other avatars really didn't have much of a similarity between decks. The Sorcerer was the second most used avatar, but there were no common theme going on with each of the different decks. Now for the semifinals, the 4 decks that were left were 2 Death Speaker decks, 1 Avatar of Earth, and 1 Pathfinder. And yes, the Pathfinder was me. In the end, Adam Ray's Avatar of Earth and Jarrett Messing's Death Speaker went into the finals. Death Speaker had twice as much decks compared to each other avatar, so the ratio included in the semifinals was understandable. Pathfinder and Avatar of Earth probably was able to navigate through the tournament due to its stable operation. Inherently, both of these decks are Air-Earth mid-range with different ramp characteristics. Overall, I'm not surprised by the semifinals lineup. I came to Gen Con with 3 choices of decks for the tournament, and it was these 3 archetypes. Finally, congrats to Jarrett. I hope we play next year at the tournament. So next, let's explain about promotional items. At the Gen Con events, there were some handouts of promo cards for winning the draft in the championship tournament. It was this, the Crown Sorcerer promo. This is my copy, and you can see the crown symbol foiling on the text box. You can see here better. The back is a normal avatar card. This was given out for people who won the draft pot 3 times in a row or scored better than 4-1 in the championship event. Also, it was given out to event volunteers for their effort. I have 2 copies, one for the volunteer work and one from the championship event as I finished 4-1. The approximate number in existence is given in the table here. Note that the exact number is unknown and Eric's Curiosa holds the right to print or distribute more of these in future events. I personally like this as Sorcerer is a useful avatar and certainly can be used for normal play. Now there was another item that was created for the event, and it was this t-shirt. These t-shirts were not distributed to the public, but only distributed to the staff and volunteer worked at the event. This shirt itself was used in other event, by the way. It was not a Gen Con exclusive. I didn't wear them and kept them in mint condition as it wasn't my color, and also I wanted to keep it fresh. Finally, my final thoughts and feedbacks of the event. I think the event itself was an overwhelming success, and I would like to congratulate Eric's Curiosa for hosting their first successful event in the US. Now, I do have some feedbacks, and it's these 4. First, I think the number of staff, including the volunteer workers, were understaffed. the volunteer workers were really busy doing everything, and I think one more staff per event would have made our lives much easier. Also, I realized that many volunteers, including me, ended up helping every single event, and honestly, it was a little bit exhausting. So I think more shift control would have been possible if there were slightly more staff available for the events. Secondly, supplying handouts for links and instructions on draft matching app and life counters would have helped. As I said before, we were understaffed, and having to explain everyone on what to do for the draft matching and where you can get life counter apps were really time consuming. Having that in one sheet of paper and handed out one per each table would have saved lots of our time. The third one is using some sort of battery-powered speakers for making announcements and explaining the flow of the event. It was really hard to shout out across the tables in the noisy stadium, and it was pretty hard for some people on the edge of the table to hear what was actually said by the staff. I know there could be some restriction on these devices, but I think there should be some measures to prevent the staff from killing their throat every event. The last one is about using social media more efficiently during the event. If you look up hashtag Sorcery GenCon on Twitter, Eric's Curiosa did make tweets, but not that active during events. I think Eric's Curiosa should be tweeting more on the events and updating the status frequently. For example, they could have tweeted there are open spaces available for certain events and you can join with general tickets. Updating the tournament matching and explaining when the finals are going to be held and explaining the scores for each player might have made it more exciting. Also, putting these information on Discord might have been better too. In terms of social media usage, I think Eric's Curiosa should do better on the next event. Overall, I think this event was really fun and it did worth my time and effort joining it all the way from Japan. I hope we will have this next year too. If you missed the event for whatever reason, I would really recommend you to come next time as it is a really great experience playing tons of Sorcery with the fans. So that's it for today's episode. Sorry for skipping some weeks of episodes, but I will be making regular weekly broadcasts from next week. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for future episodes regarding Sorcery. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have a great game.